Mega Man Battle Network 2. All cleared. Congrats!
I have played almost every Mega Man game that has ever existed. Shoutouts to Rockboard, because let's be honest, I'm gonna have to talk about that game at some point. It's, Mega Man Monopoly, it's weird. And having been one of the biggest Mega Man fans across my entire life, having grown up with this series, I can say that having played so many, this is probably the single greatest increase in quality from one game to the next that this series has ever had. And that's including the original Mega Man, which was a weird arcade game that kinda sorta had the DNA of Mega Man, going to an actual Mega Man game. See, if you didn't see my original Mega Man Battle Network review, which who did, because for some reason no one saw that video, the first game was a game that hit me very, very hard. It was a game I played as a kid and I loved everything about it. It was an RPG Mega Man game. It was a game that, even before it came out, I spent hours watching the trailer on IGN, like a year before it came out. I was so excited, but when I first played it, it still felt very, very clumsy, and the translation was basically incomprehensible. As much as people, I think, fondly remember Load Show, yeah, the translation was awful to the point where it was hard to understand what was even going on at times, and the story didn't even make any sense because of so many inconsistencies and plot holes. The fact is, it was a game that barely worked. Mega Man Battle Network 2, however, is the game they wanted to make when they made Mega Man Battle Network. And it's not just the fact that they sanded down all the rough edges and smoothed it out to make a better player experience. It's not just that they added quality of life improvements and, actually properly translated the story. No, it's that they actually leaned in very, very hard to one of the key mechanics of the fact that this is kind of a deck-building action RPG, and that is focusing very, very hard on customizing the player experience to tailor their own needs and enjoyment. This game very much meets the player on the player's level to give them an experience that is entirely beneficial and complementing how they were enjoying the game itself. And the sequel to this, Battle Network 3, would do the same. And that's why I would consider these two games like the best in all of Battle Network, because after that they decided to ignore that. Basically, this game did everything the first game did right, but better, and fixed everything wrong about it. And that makes this one of the best sequels I think Mega Man has ever had, just in terms of the jump of quality. The story, once again, follows Lan Hikari and his Net Navi Mega Man. If none of those words make any sense to you, go watch my first review, seriously, that'll clear a lot of things up. Either way, these two partners just graduated the 4th grade and are on awesome summer vacation. Woo! However, they have one very serious problem, one that could destroy their entire world and vacation. They have homework. So they promptly decide to put it off and not actually do it, and this is actually a running joke in the entire story. Instead, they're on summer vacation, fannying about. They decide to go become a city net battler, which is kind of like the unpaid interns of the already unpaid, as far as I can tell, voluntary pseudo-police force that the official net battlers were, just so that they can open up some security cubes and explore the internet, because now the internet is once again locked off to them, even though they had passwords to everything in the first game. Yeah, I don't know. But it's a good thing they became city net battlers, because it at least gives them a certain degree of authority over situations where people might be needing help, and indeed they might need help, because it seems everywhere Lan and Mega Man go on their summer vacation, this evil terrorist organization known as Gospel shows up to try and destroy the world. Side note, it's very weird that Gospel is the only thing in this game that retained its Japanese name. Everything else got translated from the original Japanese to their English names. Treble does not get that translation, instead we get Gospel, although to be fair, it does sound better. Now Lan, Mega Man, his school cohorts, Dex and Gutsman, Male and Roll, who will do no fighting because they don't really have any combat sprites outside their Net Navi chip, and Yai and Glide, who is completely useless because he doesn't show up in combat in any game. Again, not sure what value he actually brings to the table, but sure, Rich Girl gets a Navi that's just awesome, and we have to take her word for it. Along with Lan's bestest buddy, who actually is slowly starting to develop into a friendly rivalry, Eugene Sho must defeat Gospel and save the world. Except that, Sho and Proto Man are like the only people who actually do anything of value in the story. Don't think too hard about it. Either way, the plot to Mega Man Battle Network 2 is mostly just sort of cheese. It's kind of weird that this terrorist organization just conveniently pops up everywhere Lan and Mega Man go on their summer vacation. It's weird that they go camping and, oh, there they are. It's weird that it's very much a plot that is hinging on every single chapter being nothing but convenience, but it's a lot more coherent than the first game. The gameplay too, Mega Man Battle Network 2 is like if they took the first game and just fixed everything about it. It is such a better experience for it. You control Lan in the overworld and Mega Man in the cyberworld, allowing the two to act asynchronously to solve puzzles, although weirdly enough that doesn't get used in this game half as much as it did in the first game, which is a shame. But basically, Lan runs around, he sees a problem, he finds an electric device, he can jack in, this game's words, not mine, and plug Mega Man into the network so he can battle viruses. I think I see where they got the name for this series now. Once in an electrical device, Mega Man can run around and solve whatever problem is currently afflicting the world in the digital landscape, running into random encounters to begin fights with viruses, and I have to say everything about this feels snappier, faster, and just flat out better. Battle Network 1 had these weird between attack 1 second delays that just made everything feel like a slog and like you were just standing around waiting to get hit in between attacks. It was not very good. This one tightens that up significantly. There's still a bit of delay between attacks, but not so much that you feel like you're just a sitting duck waiting for your next attack to get off, which is absolutely fantastic. You can fight using your Mega Buster, which has a customizable power level depending on how you input power-ups, but most of your attacks come from battle chips. Now, battle chips are the heart of Battle Network's combat system because it is also kind of a deck-building card game. Your battle chips are the cards you have, and most of the rules from the first game remain. I don't think you can have quite as many battle chips of the same type as you could, but otherwise, pretty much all the rules from the first game still exist, although there are some caveats to them. Lan starts out like the first game with a deck basically filled with nothing but garbage that you kind of have to work around. You'll notice that every chip now has a memory allocation to it. This is actually a huge difference from the first game and very, very important. Mega Man has a set amount of memory, which you can see at the top of the screen, which you can upgrade with power-ups that you find in the world. If a battle chip has the exact same memory as Mega Man or lower, you can set that as a default chip. So at the start of every fight, your hand will have that chip to start off with, which means that you can start a fight on your terms using the weapons that you want. Now, it's not a perfect system. Not every battle chip is even possible to throw in as your default chip because some chips just have way too much memory than what's even in the game. So you can't start a fight off with a Navi chip, unfortunately. But otherwise, as long as it fits your memory allocation, you can start off a fight with whatever signature battle chip you want, which customizes the experience and allows you to start the fight on your terms. And this is a huge theme with this game, is everything being on your terms. It's important to remember that. I'll get more into that in a minute. Back to battle chips though, there's two new introductions to the battle chips. First is a new code, an asterisk code. Now if you're not familiar, battle chips come in different battle chip types or codes. A valid hand contains chips that are of identical type or identical code. The asterisk code is a little bit different though, because it is a universal code. So you can apply it to any hand and it will be valid. You can have cannon A, shotgun A, sword A, mini bomb asterisk, and that would count because while the asterisk isn't an A chip, it is classified as being the same as any other one. This asterisk code ends up allowing you to make your decks very malleable. You don't necessarily have to build your entire deck around one code anymore because the asterisk code allows you to build around that caveat. And the best thing of all, basically every chip in the game actually has an asterisk coded variant. Usually you have to go through a gacha machine to trade for them, but they're there. So if there's a chip you really, really like and you want it for your deck, but it doesn't normally come in a code you can use, now that's solved. You can basically build your deck out of anything. It will all, in theory, meet the code requirement because they could all theoretically have that asterisk code. That's amazing. Second addition to battle chips. There are now more support chips. In the first game, you could steal an entire row of enemy tiles, you could destroy tiles, you could activate a guard, or you could heal. And that was pretty much your entire support system. However, now there's significantly more shields that some have offensive capabilities. You have the ability to deploy wind, which allows you to move your opponents around the field at will. You have the ability to just straight up buff attacks now. This was a strategy that I ended up employing pretty much universally across my entire playthrough, which was I set my default chip to be an attack buff chip, so that no matter what I started with, I was already doing basically double damage. And that's ridiculous. And the game will just let me because that's how I want to play, and this game is very accommodating for that. There's one more support style chip I haven't even talked about, and that is the panel modifying chips. And that leads me nicely into a new facet of combat, and that is the panels. So combat, similar to the first game, begins with 2 sets of 3x3 square panels. These are your 2 combat environments. In the first game, your panels were very, very limited. There's a panel here, and then there's not a panel here, and that was kind of your lot. In this game, they changed that up and made it significantly deeper. Now you can apply elemental properties to each panel, which will change how you can strategize combat and how enemies can even affect you, which can change combat dramatically. Now you have grass stage, which allows you to do double damage with fire attacks, as well as grass element characters to recover health on them. You have ice tiles, which allow non-water characters to slip around uncontrollably, whereas water characters can walk around them normally. Fire panels allow fire types to walk around without taking damage, but anything else will take a flat 50 damage, which at the start of the game is half your health, which is kind of substantial, especially if you could turn, say, an entire environment into fire panels, and there's a chip that'll let you do it too. There's magnetic panels, which are weird. If you step on a panel that's next to a magnetic panel on a horizontal plane, you get pulled to the magnetic panel. I think ostensibly electric characters are not supposed to be affected by this, but from what I could tell, that wasn't implemented. So once again, electric element kinda gets the shaft, like the first game. There's also Holy Element, which is not an element you will see until basically the end of the game, but anything on a Holy panel takes half damage. And there are battle chips associated with each and every one of these panel properties, meaning that you could, in theory, fight without ever landing a blow on your opponent, just depending on how you manipulate the environment around them and their own elements. And all of these things are hugely impactful and greatly affect how you approach any sort of encounter. For example, you know how you do double damage on grass tiles? What happens if you were to, say, fight a grass character on a grass tile? Sure, they'll be recovering a little bit, but yeah, they'll be taking 4 times damage to your fire attack. And you'll wipe out the grass tile, meaning that they won't have any way to recover anymore. It's really fascinating to see this small thing add so much depth to the game. And once again, as with everything I talked about before, it lends a sense of customization to how you approach gameplay, because that could be your default chip. That could be what your entire strategy is built upon, and the game will let you do that, and it's more than happy to, because that's how you're enjoying this game. It's so incredibly accommodating, and that's not even the best part, because I haven't talked about the thing that makes me most excited about Battle Network 2 and 3, and that is style change. So, once again, go watch my first Battle Network video, but in the first game, there was an armor set. It was cumbersome, it was clumsy, it was bad. 3 elements of the 4 got armor, and if you had that equipped, which you could only equip at one time, and you had to go through a really slow, awkward menu to do it, it wasn't very fun. But if you had that armor, you'd take half damage to that element, but you take double damage to whatever was strong against it. And the only time you'd want to is against bosses, and most of the bosses weren't affected by armor to begin with, so it was kind of a giant waste of time of a system. This game tries to iterate upon that and make it something far more impactful, and do it in a way that's not only fun and significantly better than the armor system, but do it in a way that's actively rewarding you for playing the way you want to. And that's amazing. Okay, so let me back up. At some point in the story, you end up getting a device that allows you to activate style change. The game in the background, as you've been playing at this point, will actually be tallying up points in regards to your actions. The game is actively sort of analyzing how you're playing. And once you've completed 280 battles, the game will give you a style based on your combat style. The short version is that Mega Man is given a reward in the form of a power-up that encourages you to enjoy and play the game your way, because it is based on how you played. There are 5 specific styles in the game, not including Mega Man's default form. You have Team Style, which allows you to add more Navi chips to your folder if you like using Navi chips. It is like the worst style out of all of them, but you can do it. Guts Style, which allows you to double your buster damage at the cost of reducing your buster's rapid fire rate, but it's ridiculously powerful. Custom Style, a personal favorite of mine, which allows you to have not 1, but 2 additional battle chips in your hand every turn, which is insanely powerful. Like, seriously, when you can have 2 additional super attacks at any time, why wouldn't you take that? You also have Shield Style if you like playing defensively, which starts you off with a barrier, and provided you can use a button input, which I'm not very good at, you can summon a shield at any time, not unlike Proto Man, which allows you to basically keep yourself invulnerable forever if you've got the timing down. That's ridiculous. There's also one other style that's only available after you beat all the bosses as fast as possible, and it kind of combines all of them but with a huge debuff to your character. So even when you have the superpower at the end of the game, you don't necessarily have superpowers. In fact, you might be weaker than before, but it's still pretty awesome, and I'm glad I got it. Each of the styles also has an element associated with it. The first one you get will always be fire style, but after that it's random based on what styles you don't have. So if you have a fire style, your next one will never be fire style. And each of these elements has a different buster that each has special effects and a different way to attack. Electricity gives you the Zap Ring, a very, very powerful chip. Not in terms of how much damage it does, it actually is the weakest of the bunch, but it has a paralysis effect that affects anything that gets hit by it and stuns them for a few seconds, which can be unbelievably powerful, allowing you to create all kinds of openings with chips that might not hit your opponent otherwise. Next you have Heat Style, which has a flamethrower gun, and the flamethrower is a little bit slow but very, very powerful. Next you have Aqua Style, which shoots out a bubble, sort of like the sort of bubble shotgun attack. It's not that remarkable, honestly. And finally is Wood Style. Wood Style is weird because its charge attack is both the most powerful out of all of them and the weakest. This is an attack that allows you to create a fan 2 tiles ahead of Mega Man that can do up to like 180 damage over the course of about 10 hits. So if only one of those hits, you're going to be doing very, very little damage. And the fact that it's only spawning 2 squares ahead means that if your opponent's staying directly in front of you or on the back row, you can't hit them. It's very, very powerful, especially because as a wood element, you'll actually heal on grass panels as well. And in fact, you could create a really powerful strategy about creating an entire grass stage and then just lobbing fire attacks at your enemy for double damage while you heal. And here's the really cool thing about it. If you have a style you really, really like, but you want to experiment with something else, no problem, because you get a second slot to allow you to equip 2 different styles at once. So you can have Heat Custom Style as your first one because you want to play around with the flamethrower buster that thing gives you. Or you could play as Wood Shield if you really want to play around with that shield. It gives you options. There are some ridiculous strategies that Style Change incorporates and allows you to experience, and it's all to complement how you are already enjoying and experiencing the game naturally. The game is actively working on your level with you to allow you to experience the game your way, and you're actively rewarded for it. The way they designed the system is mind-blowing to me, and it is easily one of the best things Battle Network ever did. Which makes me really confused why Battle Network 4 and onwards did the exact opposite and makes you play the game a completely different way to meet the game on its level to have a very less than rewarding experience with its transformations. Seriously, Battle Network 4 is the worst one, man. And I'm gonna have to play that at some point, crap. Now the rules of battle chips are basically the same as they were in the first game. You start each individual fight off with a hand of 5 randomly picked battle chips from your deck, and you must go each round of 10 seconds with whatever hand you select by creating valid hands to use on your opponents. Now a valid hand is a hand of battle chips that either have all the exact same type or all the exact same code. And if you happen to combine a certain set of chips together that share properties, you can use a super ability known as a program advance. One really cool quality of life update this game has, it actually tracks the recipes for program advances you've already used. So if you can't quite remember what you've done, or the order you need to put them in, this game will remind you if you've done it once, and that's awesome! And there are so many more battle chips than the first game had. The first game had 176, I believe. This one, 266, and it doesn't reuse everything from the first game either. It actually throws out quite a few chips from the first game to introduce completely new chips that function completely differently. It's fascinating to see how much has changed from the first game and how much has been added and how much it's been improved upon. The chips, the combat, the way you build a deck, everything has been refined and is designed all around giving you the most customizable experience, tailor-made just for how you want to enjoy the game. It is absolutely brilliant. The game now actually has side quests. I mean, the first game had like 3, but they're just talk to a guy, plug into the thing in front of them, and solve their problem. This time, you actually have to go to a message board, find a request, go find the client, and solve their problem. And it usually requires some degree of thinking and puzzle solving to figure out what they need, and where to go to get it. Or, you know, where you need to find their target to go beat up, or whatever. And there's actually quite a lot of them. Each chapter refreshes the list and adds 2 or 3 side quests, which, you know, effectively means that each chapter you're getting just as many side quests as the entire first game had. And by the end, you've got significantly more because this game is actually quite a bit longer than the first game as well. Unfortunately, in the same place where you get those side quests, there's also license exams, because this game needed to take something from Mega Man Legends 2. Oh god, it's one of these stupid purple things. I hate these things, I hate these things, I hate these things. Just please die now. Fortunately, they're nowhere near as bad in that game because screw that game's licenses. There's a total of 5 licenses, B, A, S, SS, and SSS. The last 2 are only available post-game. The third one is an optional thing you can get during the main game but doesn't help you all that much. The first 2 are mandatory for the plot in order to bypass security to actually wander around the internet. And you have to take these license exams to get these licenses. And these license exams are usually answer a quiz, go for a quest where you have to track down X number of individuals, and then fight a gauntlet match of enemy. They're not super interesting, they're not super engaging, and they really just feel like filler content. And like the first game, there's an entire chapter that's dedicated to not having a dungeon and just wandering around the internet, except the internet is significantly bigger now, so it takes longer. Everything about that penultimate chapter kind of sucks. Even the net navvy, Freezeman, is just awful. I mean, Freezeman was one of the coolest robot masters, and they just made him a generic guy made of ice. Original Freezeman, he was a cocky hotshot robot master that if you charged your attack when you jumped in, he would taunt you until you fired at him so he could jump over your attack. This guy just hides out in the back row and hides under his shield and drops ice on you. He's so boring. Fortunately, pretty much all the other robot masters in this game are awesome. Like, seriously, Nightman. Nightman is legendarily cool. And there's a bulletin board system where you can get loose amounts of information and hints on how to do stuff, how to defeat certain enemies, cool chip combinations, where to find specific enemies, and even advancing the plot sometimes. The BBS is a little bit weird, but it's appreciated that it's here, and it makes it feel like you're in a real world surrounded by real people. I mean, heck, when you write your first message, someone actually chastises you for not introducing yourself before you send your first message, which is just peak internet. The fact that someone thought to do that was just brilliant, and I hate that person who responded that way. Seriously, screw you. But the internet itself is fantastic this time around as well. It's significantly bigger than the first game, and it's actually broken up into about 6 sectors, depending on which region of the world you're currently exploring. Each one of these has a completely different background, so you're not staring at the Internet Explorer logo for the entirety of the game, which is appreciated. They all have a different tile set, which lends to sort of a different feel to each area as well, which is great. And they all have different enemies and sort of environmental nuances and ways to get around, which is a really cool way to make every chunk of the world feel different, even though it's just in the structure of how the basic design of how you walk around these series of tubes, because as we know, the internet is not a truck. The game doesn't utilize using ramps to hide paths anymore. Don't worry, there's still stuff hidden behind them because it is an isometric game, but they're a secret collectible that you can pick up and take somewhere and trade for really ridiculously powerful chips if you collect enough. And there's even a little bit of lore tied to them, if you're willing to actually read between the lines as to what's going on in the plot. The fact is, there's actually lots of hints as to what's going on in the background and what you actually do fitting into that if you're willing to pay attention. This game is friggin' brilliant! They've added one simple difference between how the combat and exploration interact in this game than the first game, and it completely changes everything. Now, your health does not refill between fights. Your health is a manageable resource that you have to keep an eye on. You can't approach combat half as recklessly as you could in the first game, because that will have repercussions later on. Every single hit you take in combat will affect your exploration and how long you can stay in the internet. And that's a big difference for such a small change. They've also added a run button mapped to the L button, and this means that you can just run from fights and you don't need a battle chip in your folder taking up a space that could otherwise be used for anything else. Although weirdly enough, they still have the battle chips. I think the idea is that the battle chips are a guaranteed run, whereas just the escape button is based on your level difference between your enemy. I'm not really sure, honestly. It feels like such a dumb thing to have kept if you're just going to have a dedicated run button anyway. But either way, now you can run without having to build your folder around it, which is nice. The game even has an incredible post-game as well. The first one sorta had one, but there wasn't really ever a reason to do this. Like, there's a few extra areas at the end of the game, but you didn't know anything was there, you didn't need to go there or do anything, and when you actually did unlock the secret bosses that were hidden there, the game never told you that they were there, or what you had to do to unlock them. The end game in the first game was very, very obtuse, and it was something you had to just sort of stumble upon and hope it works. At the end of the game, this will actually tease you a new area, a new threat, And there's actually story and lore and plot development to this secret area that leads to the next game. They made the end game significantly more meaningful, and it teases you along to try and encourage you to see what's out there. And there's tons of challenges in it as well. You'll run into enemies that have a lot of health and won't die unless you kill everything on screen in one hit. And that can be pretty stressful, but at the same time, it's also basically just a DPS check. But still, you know, it's impressive that they tried to make you really consider how you were playing to prepare you for the big scary bosses that were there. If you manage to sneak past all this and have the licenses to open up all the doors, you fight 4 different super powerful navis, and you find like an entire 5th of the game's battle chip content just locked to these last 3 areas that were otherwise unavailable in the main game. There is so much here, and the first game's extra content was okay. Here it blows it out of the water. And if there was one other big issue about the gameplay, there's still some really awkward, hard to get battle chips that, you know, similar to the first game, are just not very fun. On the bright side, Howitzer, now known as Cannonball, is actually something you can get, because the game actually programmed encounters where you can actually get it from the enemy. So that's nice, but drop down is back and it's still obnoxiously hard to get. I don't know if it's a 3% drop rate anymore, but the fact is, it's still ridiculously hard to get. I got 100% completion at about 41 hours, a little longer than the previous game, but I can tell you that the last like 3 hours were me just grinding the drop down guy again because his drops were so bad, and I didn't even get it from him. I had to go out and get the battle chip from a chip trader that would randomly distribute battle chips to me and just hope. Now, the overall presentation of Mega Man Battle Network 2 is fantastic. It looks great. It utilizes quite a few sprites from the first game. I think pretty much all the generic NPC and lands portraits are basically the same from the first game. They've remixed all the navis from their original Robot Master designs, and with the exception of Freeze Man, they are all significantly better, I think. And Nightman is just awesome. I love his Navi design. I think he's the star of this game in terms of best Navi. And all the new viruses look cool, and, you know, when you see them, you immediately want to know what chips they drop and what they're going to do. It's fun to see all the new viruses, and I love it. All the new environments are really, really good, and they fit the theme of the area that you're going into. I like how visually distinct everything is. Audio-wise, the soundtrack is very, very well done. They kind of kept the main Battle Network theme, although they've remixed it for this game, which is nice. And they kept a little victory jingle for when you beat an encounter, and that's appreciated. But the rest of the soundtrack is fantastic. Lots of little electronic bleeps and bloops that make you feel like this is the theme of the internet, and that's how it feels. Yeah, it just looks and sounds great, and I think that in general the presentation is fantastic. Now, if you want a copy of Mega Man Battle Network 2 on the GBA, cheapest one I'm seeing on eBay in English right now is about $50, so maybe $10 more than what it sold new back in the day. So it's nice to see these games kind of keep their price but not explode stupidly if you want the classic version. That said, you can also get the Legacy Collection, which, while it does not actually respect the legacy of this series as much as it probably should, does actually contain a few extras. You do get the Gospel Chips, which were event exclusive in the first game and completely wreck the game if you use them, which also means you have access to a special program advance that up till now was not really available in North America. That's awesome! If you get the first half of the Legacy Collection, because for some reason you have to buy it twice to get the whole collection, you'll get this along with the first game so you understand what's going on and how much better this game is than that. And you'll get the third game, which is the best one of the lot, so that's cool. And if you only buy the first half, you don't have to play Battle Network 4, so that's also a big plus. I loved the original Mega Man Battle Network. That is a game that's very near and dear to my heart, but as I said back in my review of it, that game feels like a proof of concept. It's a game that feels like it's being held together with chewing gum and hope. This feels like the Mega Man Battle Network they wanted to give us. This makes everything significantly better than the first game, and it's all tailored to you, doing exactly what you want, customizing your folder your way, allowing you to use Mega Man your way, and encouraging and indeed rewarding you for doing it. Style change alone is a reason why I would recommend this game over most other Battle Network games, but the fact that everything in this game just feels so good and so encouraging to let you enjoy the game your way is just amazing. They took a game that, while very, very rough, I enjoyed, and they turned around and hit us with a sequel that blew the first one out of the water and is such a substantial increase in quality from the first game that I would be a fool not to recommend this if this looks awesome to you, because this is maybe one of the best Mega Man games I've ever played. But that said, I still haven't talked about the third one. Okay, for the sake of this fight, I think we're gonna have to, because we're just gonna get face tanked. Oh god, we need space for that. We're gonna lose this fight rather badly. There's nothing we can do, either we're trapped. So fortunately we saved before that.